So if you're like me, you carry one of these in your go bag at all times because you never know when you're going to need to poke a hole in a wall. So this is a keyhole saw, or sometimes called a jab saw. And I decided I'm going to make one today. I've had this one since, 2012, I believe. It has done just fine, but I'd like to give making another saw a shot. If you haven't seen one of my latest videos, I did make a handsaw, my very first handsaw, and I learned a lot in that process. But today I'm going to make a jab saw, sometimes known as a keyhole saw. So what are the distinguishing features of a keyhole or jab saw? Well, number one, there's always a piercing tip that always has a chisel grind on the front, and that is for stabbing into the sheetrock or plaster and starting the cut. Now, this jab saw is unique in that it has teeth on both edges, but usually they have large teeth on one edge. From what I can tell, there is not a lot of set involved. There's a teeny bit that I can see. Sheetrock is a lot softer than wood, so it has these large teeth with a lot of clearance to keep the dust out from clogging up the cut. But overall, this is probably not the hardest steel in the world, but it's probably pretty tough because you never know what you're going to bounce into inside a wall cavity. So just for starters, I want to see how thick this steel is, get an idea. It's fairly thick. It's about 1/16 of an inch thick, which I just happen to have stock that thick, so that's cool. And let's just get an idea for how hard this jab saw is. I don't see it being above 60 Rockwell, but we'll see if it's at least 60 Rockwell. Nope, 60 is digging in pretty easily. So it's definitely softer than 60 Rockwell. Let's try 55. No, 55 Rockwell is still digging in. So it is softer than 55 Rockwell. Let's try 50. All right, so this jab saw in particular is between 50 and 55 Rockwell, so relatively soft in comparison to a knife. But it's very tough, clearly. I've used it a lot, it has not broken. So this is tougher rather than harder. We're not trying to hold a razor edge here, we just want these teeth to hold up and not break when we send it into a wall cavity. Alright, so for this project, I will be using 15N20 again. This stock is the right size thickness for this saw, and it is used in industrial bandsaw blades. So much like my previous first attempt at a handsaw, I will be using 15N20 again. It just makes sense for the application. Alright, so the rough shaping is done. This is the general shape of the keyhole saw. Pinholes are already drilled, and I have selected lead wood as the handle material because it's very hard, very tough, but it takes a very high polish, so I think it'll be easy to clean off. Drywall's messy stuff. I also think it's strong enough to hold up as the finger guard without breaking off. So let's get to making the teeth. But if you'd like to see my video on working with leadwood, I will leave it in the description below, along with my first attempt at making a handsaw. So this is the initial filing of the saw teeth shape. It's a long and tedious process, but I was proud that I was able to keep the teeth a more consistent shape and size this time around than my first handsaw attempt. These files are great though, and I highly recommend them. They're made by Tsuban, a Japanese company, and they are bar none the best files I've ever used. I wish I found them many years ago. So here's another shot so you guys can see what it looks like. Each tooth takes probably about a minute to 2 minutes to file the shape successfully. So what I've done here is I marked in blue every other tooth, so I know to file only the silver tooth to shape. And on the other side, it is the opposite. That way, I don't lose visual track of which tooth I'm supposed to be shaping in which direction. So here I am shaping every other tooth with the file yet again. I like to picture this as making it kind of like a shark's tooth. So I am bringing it more to a spear point, if you will, rather than a chisel. This allows for better cutting and greater sharpness. In this shot, you can really see the shark tooth look. And here I decided to just file the piercing tip cutting edge in. These files are so great that there was really no need for me to go over to the belt sander and sand in this bevel. These files cut great, and really you get a bit more control over things when you're doing things by hand. So this whole piercing tip only took me a few minutes to file in. And because this is 15 and 20, you want to heat it up between 1460 and 1480 degrees Fahrenheit before you quench it in oil. I believe I set this for 1485 degrees Fahrenheit because I like to give myself a little wiggle room in the temperature, especially with something like 15 and 20 where it has a lot of nickel, it has a lot of alloying, and you want to make sure you get a good alloy mix going on in the steel before you quench it. And my favorite part, this is the quench. I'm using Park's 50 fast oil. 15 and 20, you can probably get away with just water, or I've even seen some guys will just use aluminum plates. It hardens very easily, so you want something very fast. And then I tempered the saw again in my heat treat oven at 600 degrees Fahrenheit to get it just about 55 Rockwell. It takes some pretty high temperatures to get 15 and 20 down into the mid 50s on the Rockwell scale. think it's time we give this jab saw a shot. I built this little prop wall so we could test it. This is 1/2-inch sheetrock. Not too bad. Pretty effortless when penetrating the wall. I don't really have to push that hard, just kind of wiggle it in there. Yeah, that was pretty good. Pretty happy with that. I like it. Well, that's because this is only a 2x2 sheetrock square. Just peeled off the bottom. But I think you get the idea. It works just fine. And it's the best looking jab saw I've ever seen personally. I guess the only thing I really want to try now is I just want to give it a good stab and see how easily it goes in. You know, not the slow wiggle start when you're being careful. But let's say I'm in a situation and I just really got to poke a hole in the wall real quick. How would that feel with this saw? So 3, 2, 1. Not bad. I might sharpen the tip a little bit more. I didn't get all the way through with one stab, but I mean, you're not going to get that with your commercial jab saws either, unless you really put some force behind it. This little wall is too wobbly. There's no rigidity in it at all. But like I said, you get the idea. I'm really happy with it. It's a pretty cool little project. I'm glad I decided to make it. Alright, so I think that about wraps up this video. Thanks for coming along on this little journey making this keyhole / jab saw. I learned a lot and I had a lot of fun making this video. I'm going to toss this jab saw in my bag and I'm going to use it whenever I need to invade a wall space, you know. I was proud I was able to keep the teeth more consistent than my last hand saw. And overall, I'm pretty happy with the performance as well. And who's going to complain about a nice polished leadwood handle? But all right, guys, thanks for tuning in. Until next time, I'll see you.